The soft hum of jazz filled the Grand Oak, a classy downtown restaurant in New York City. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, and among them was Ryan Brooks, a polite man in his early 30s with a calm smile and rolled-up sleeves. To everyone, he was just another waiter, humble, quiet, ordinary. But when Olivia Carter, a wealthy socialite dripping in diamonds, walked in, the air changed. She snapped her fingers, scoffed at his uniform, and spoke down to him like he didn't exist. Ryan only smiled, hiding the truth no one knew. He owned the restaurant. The afternoon sun filtered through the grand windows of the Grand Oak, casting soft shadows over the elegantly set tables. The hum of quiet conversations blended with the clinking of silverware. Ryan Brooks moved seamlessly between the tables, his movements graceful and fluid, offering a warm smile to every guest he served. To most, he was just another member of the staff, another worker, a cog in the machine that powered one of the finest restaurants in New York City. But to Ryan, it wasn't just about serving food. Every plate he carried, every drink he poured, was a reflection of his hard work, of a dream he had built from the ground up. As he approached the table by the window, Olivia Carter sat with her entourage, her sharp eyes scanning the room like a hawk. The air shifted the moment she entered. She was known in the social circles for her wealth, her beauty, and her ego. Clad in a designer outfit that cost more than most people's rent, she exuded an aura of entitlement that could fill a room. Ryan approached her table with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Carter. How may I assist you today?" Olivia glanced up at him dismissively, barely acknowledging his presence. "Finally," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for him to hear, "a waiter who knows how to approach." Her tone was laced with condescension. Ryan, unfazed, nodded. She snapped her fingers, and immediately Ryan's attention was drawn back to her. "You can start by bringing me the best bottle of your finest white wine," she said, her voice dripping with superiority. "Don't waste my time with anything else. And make sure it's chilled, not warm like last time." Ryan's smile didn't waver. "Of course, Ms. Carter. I'll be right back with that." As he walked away, he overheard her complain to her friend, loud enough for him to catch every word. "Ugh, I can't believe I'm stuck with these low-class people serving me. How do they even manage to stay employed?" The comment stung, but Ryan didn't react. Instead, he went about his task with precision, as he always did. He wasn't there to prove anything to her or anyone else. He was there to do his job. Minutes later, he returned with the chilled wine, pouring it carefully into Olivia's glass. He stood back, ready to move on to the next order. But Olivia wasn't done yet. Without warning, she scoffed. "This is the third time you've brought me the wrong wine. Can't you do anything right?" Ryan paused, looking at her with the same calm expression. "I apologize, Ms. Carter. I'll make sure to take care of it right away." But Olivia wasn't finished. She threw her napkin on the table and waved her hand dismissively. No. I don't want to deal with your incompetence anymore. Maybe you should just go back to whatever low-paying job you had before you ended up here. What are you doing serving people like me, anyway?" The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive. All around the room, the soft murmurs of other diners fell away. The staff in the back had noticed, too. The usual hum of the restaurant was replaced by the uncomfortable tension that hung in the air. Ryan, ever the professional, didn't flinch. He remained silent, his eyes trained on the table, focused on his duty. As he moved to collect the wine glass, Olivia's voice cut through the air again, her tone dripping with disdain. "I don't think you're even capable of bringing me what I want. Get me a new glass of wine now and make it fast." Ryan nodded, his hand steady as he took the glass. But as he did, a slight tremor in his wrist made a drop of wine slip over the edge of the glass, landing on Olivia's pristine designer bag. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Everyone in the room watched in stunned silence. Ryan immediately reached for a napkin, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Carter. I'll get this cleaned up right away." Olivia's face twisted in disgust. Her eyes narrowed as she took a sharp breath. "You've ruined my bag, you idiot," she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you know how much this bag costs? I'll have you fired for this." Ryan's heart sank, but he didn't argue. He knew the weight of her words could carry significant consequences. Still, he remained composed. "I truly apologize, Ms. Carter. Let me take care of the bag immediately. But Olivia wasn't interested in apologies. With a quick motion, she flung her hand in frustration, knocking the glass of wine off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. For a moment, Ryan stood there, stunned, unsure of what to do. The other staff members exchanged looks, but no one dared intervene. Mark, the manager, was still handling another table in the back and hadn't noticed what was happening. Ryan bent down, gathering the broken glass and spilled wine with practiced precision. His hands were steady as he cleaned up the mess, not wanting to escalate the situation. The whole restaurant was watching. The waiters, the customers, the cooks in the back. They all knew what was happening and none of them said a word. As he finished cleaning, Olivia's voice rang out again, sharp and cutting. "You're useless," she spat. "I should have your job for this. You people never know how to do anything right." Ryan stood up slowly, his gaze unwavering as he met her eyes for the first time since the incident. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize again. He simply said, "I understand, Miss Carter. I'll make sure this doesn't happen again." But just before he could leave, Olivia said something that cut deeper than anything else. "It's no wonder you're just a waiter. People like you will never amount to anything." The words echoed in Ryan's mind as he walked away, his heart heavy, his resolve steady. The insult was sharp, but he wasn't going to let it break him. It was hard, but he'd lived through worse. In the back, the staff exchanged silent glances. They were disgusted by Olivia's treatment of Ryan, but they said nothing. They were used to this kind of behavior from her. Ryan finished his shift without a word. As he left for the night, he knew one thing. He didn't need Olivia's approval. He didn't need her respect. He didn't even need her money. He had built the Grand Oak from the ground up, a restaurant founded on respect, integrity, and the hard work of people like him. But Olivia's cruelty had shaken something in him. Ryan knew the truth. His business was his, and it was his choice how he handled people like Olivia, and one day, he would show her that respect didn't come from money. It came from the heart. The clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen echoed through the back of the Grand Oak as the staff worked swiftly, preparing the evening's dinner rush. In the hum of the kitchen, amidst the sizzling sounds of searing steaks and boiling sauces, a quiet tension filled the air. Ryan Brooks had worked in restaurants for over a decade, but tonight felt different. The spatulas and knives in his hands seemed almost too heavy, the weight of Olivia's words still pressing on his chest. It wasn't the first time he had been insulted, far from it, but something about the way she had dismissed him, belittled him so casually, had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Back in the kitchen, the other waitstaff glanced at each other, exchanging looks that spoke volumes. They had all witnessed Olivia's behavior toward Ryan, and they knew what had happened. The woman was not just a rich customer. She was a force of entitlement, her every word dripping with disdain for those she deemed beneath her. But what none of them knew was that Ryan Brooks wasn't just another waiter. The whispers began almost immediately, soft at first, but growing louder as the evening wore on. "She doesn't know who he really is," one of the chefs muttered, his voice low as he chopped vegetables. Another waiter nodded, leaning against the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. "She thinks he's just one of us, doesn't she?" he asked, glancing toward Ryan, who was quietly loading trays. "She doesn't even realize that this restaurant," the first chef continued, his eyes drifting to Ryan's back as he worked, "was built by him." The second waiter's eyes widened. "Wait, are you telling me Ryan owns the Grand Oak?" There was a brief pause, and then the kitchen erupted into murmurs. It wasn't like Ryan to bring attention to himself, let alone reveal his true role. He had built the restaurant from scratch, yes, but he had chosen to remain a part of the staff, working alongside them to understand how customers treated others and how employees felt. His humility was the foundation of his character. He wanted to lead by example, to be present in the day-to-day operations, rather than sit behind a desk detached from the heart of his restaurant. "Yeah, that's him," the chef said, shaking his head in disbelief. "He could fire her in a second, but he doesn't. He's a man of his word." The whispers carried through the kitchen, shared between the staff, who slowly began to understand the truth. Ryan had been working undercover, testing his staff, and most importantly, getting a feel for the treatment people like him, the so-called lower-class workers, endured. He wanted to see firsthand how people treated waiters, cooks, and cleaners. To no one's surprise, his findings were far from flattering. Doesn't he have enough money to just sit back and relax? Why does he work here? One of the newer employees asked. Another voice responded, because he wants to understand what it's like. That's the kind of man he is. He's got integrity, you know? In the corner of the kitchen, Lily, the head waitress, leaned against the counter, her arms crossed as she looked at Ryan, silently taking in the scene. She admired Ryan's quiet strength, the way he carried himself without ever making a fuss. He had never sought recognition for what he had built. And yet the restaurant was a testament to his hard work. Lily had noticed things others didn't. The way Ryan never hesitated to pitch in, help with cleaning, or deliver an order when a server was swamped. The way he'd slip into the kitchen during rush hour, offering encouragement, never expecting any praise. To him, it wasn't about being seen. It was about building something meaningful. She sighed, shaking her head as she leaned over to a fellow waiter. She has no idea who she's messing with, Lily muttered, her voice low but with a note of admiration for Ryan. Meanwhile, across the room, Olivia Carter sat at her table, her expression still haughty, still bubbling with the venom she had thrown Ryan's way earlier. She had finished her meal and was now sipping her wine, discussing her next shopping spree with her friend. She didn't bring me the wine I wanted, Olivia continued, speaking loudly for anyone nearby to hear. And she didn't even apologize properly. People like him need to know their place. It's ridiculous, really. They act like they're entitled to respect. Like just because they have a job, they deserve to be treated like they matter. She laughed, an empty, bitter sound. Her friend, Carly, nodded in agreement, though she wasn't nearly as loud. I know, right? It's crazy how they think they can act like equals just because they're working in a fancy restaurant. They should stick to the basics. I mean, how much are they really contributing? Olivia took another sip of her wine, her eyes scanning the room as she casually threw insults in Ryan's direction. She didn't know he was standing just outside the dining area, quietly observing. The staff had become accustomed to her rudeness, but none of them, not even the manager, had ever stepped in to correct her behavior. They just let her talk, but Ryan wasn't like the others. Ryan Brooks, the man who owned it all, the man who built the Grand Oak from the ground up, remained silent in the face of Olivia's cruelty. He didn't need to defend himself. He didn't need to explain who he was. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. Still, hearing her degrade the very people who worked tirelessly to make her experience comfortable, it hit a nerve. It was in that moment that Ryan realized something important. The world didn't need another arrogant, self-important person like Olivia. It needed more people who understood humility, kindness, and respect. And Ryan was willing to show them just what that looked like, one silent act at a time. The atmosphere in the Grand Oak was tense. The soft murmur of diners and the clink of glassware, drowned out by the buzzing of a phone line in the back. Olivia sat at her table, her posture straight as an arrow, eyes narrowed as she glared at Ryan from across the room. She had been stewing since the wine incident, and her anger had only grown with each passing minute. Her face, once a picture of aristocratic composure, now looked twisted in frustration and entitlement. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room. Ryan paused mid-step, his hand still on the edge of a tray as he turned to look at her. He could feel the tension in the air like a taut wire ready to snap. "Yes, Ms. Carter?" Ryan asked, his tone as polite as ever, his posture remaining relaxed despite the brewing storm in front of him. "Bring me the manager," Olivia ordered, her voice cold and unwavering. Her eyes never left him. A look of contempt settled on her face. Ryan nodded and turned to make his way to the kitchen, where Mark Wilson, the restaurant manager, was organizing a stack of plates. Within moments, Mark was at Olivia's table, his brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay, Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice polite but clearly apprehensive. Mark had always done his best to ensure the restaurant ran smoothly, but he had never dealt with someone as difficult as Olivia before. "I've had enough of this," Olivia said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This man, Ryan, he's incompetent. He ruined my designer bag and now he's bringing me the wrong wine. This is unacceptable. I demand that you fire him immediately. Immediately. Mark's eyes flicked toward Ryan, who had just re-entered the dining area. Ryan's expression was unreadable, calm, almost indifferent. It was as if he had been asked to solve a simple puzzle, nothing more. But the tension in the air was palpable. "I'm so sorry, Miss Carter," Mark said, his voice rising with uncertainty. "I'll make sure we take care of this right away. I'll have Ryan step aside so we can sort this out." Ryan, still as composed as ever, stepped forward. "Mark," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm, "I'd like to speak with you privately in the back office. It's important." Mark looked surprised but nodded quickly, motioning for Ryan to follow him. He shot Olivia an apologetic look, but Olivia only glared back at him, impatient and angry. As Ryan and Mark walked toward the back office, the tension in the restaurant seemed to increase. The other staff members exchanged glances, unsure of what was happening. They all knew about Olivia's behavior, but they also knew Ryan had a way of handling things that never failed. His quiet demeanor, his refusal to stoop to others' levels, always gave him an unspoken strength. Back office, private conversation. Ryan closed the door behind him as he stepped into the small office with Mark. The space was dimly lit, with a single desk lamp casting shadows over the wooden desk where paperwork was scattered. Mark stood by the desk, his hands fidgeting with the edge of a report. "Look, Ryan, I don't know what's going on, but you need to understand. Miss Carter is a regular here. Her family owns half the real estate in Manhattan and—" Mark paused, his voice trailing off as he noticed Ryan's unflinching calm. Ryan smiled gently but didn't interrupt. He wasn't here to justify Olivia's behavior or to explain himself. He was here for something more important. "Mark, I need to tell you something," Ryan began, his voice still soft but carrying a certain weight. "I know you've always respected me, and I appreciate that. But there's something I've been keeping from everyone, even you." Mark furrowed his brows, confused but intrigued. "What are you talking about, Ryan?" Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes locking with Mark's. "I'm not just a waiter here, Mark. I'm the owner of the Grand Oak." For a moment, Mark didn't speak. The words hung in the air between them like a thunderclap waiting to strike. His face morphed from confusion to disbelief. "Wait, what? What do you mean, you own this place?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, I built this restaurant from the ground up. Every single dish, every piece of decor, every detail you see here, it's all mine. I've been working undercover as a waiter for one reason only: to understand how people treat those who serve them. I wanted to make sure our employees are respected and that the guests are treated with the highest level of service." Mark's mouth opened and closed, his mind struggling to process what Ryan was saying. "But why? Why would you want to work as a waiter? Why not just, I don't know, sit back and manage from behind the scenes?" Ryan smiled again, a genuine, almost bittersweet smile. "Because I believe in humility, Mark. I believe in earning respect, not demanding it. I wanted to experience the reality of what my staff goes through, to see how our guests interact with people like us, and most importantly, to see who really cares about people who don't hold the power." Mark stood frozen, his mind racing. He'd always admired Ryan's work ethic, but this was a side of Ryan he had never imagined. "But what about Olivia?" Mark asked. "She's going to flip when she finds out you're the owner. You know how powerful she is in this city. If she finds out you're the one who owns this restaurant, it could ruin everything." Ryan nodded, his face serious. "I know, but that's not the point, Mark. The point is I need to handle this with dignity, not retaliation. I'm not here to fire her. I'm here to remind her, and everyone else, and that respect isn't something you get because you can pay for it. It's earned by how you treat others." Mark stood silently for a long moment. The weight of Ryan's words settled in, and he finally nodded slowly. "I get it now. You've been teaching all of us something more than just how to serve food. You've been teaching us how to lead with integrity." Ryan gave him a small, knowing smile. "Exactly. Now let's go back out there and handle this the right way." Back to the dining area. As Ryan walked back into the dining area with Mark following closely behind, the staff went silent. The tension was palpable. Olivia sat with her arms crossed, tapping her manicured fingers on the table. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Ryan approach. "Well?" she demanded, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Are you going to fire him or what?" Ryan stood before her, his posture straight, his expression calm but unwavering. He spoke softly but with authority. "No, Miss Carter, I'm not going to fire him, but I am going to ask you to leave." His words hung in the air like a challenge. Olivia blinked in surprise, her mouth open in shock. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me," Ryan said, his voice steady. "I'm asking you to leave. You're no longer welcome here." The entire restaurant watched as Ryan stood tall, his composure unwavering. Olivia's face turned red with fury, but there was nothing she could do. The owner had spoken, and he had made his decision. Ryan stood in the back office, his hand resting on the cool edge of the desk. The fluorescent lights above hummed quietly, a stark contrast to the tension that had built up in the restaurant. Mark stood beside him, his face still pale from the shock of Ryan's confession. "Are you sure about this, Ryan?" Mark asked, his voice hushed as if afraid to break the silence. "I mean, this is huge." Ryan gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Mark, I've spent years building this restaurant. It's my life's work. I don't need to hide anymore." Mark shook his head, still processing the revelation. "But why keep it a secret? Why work as a waiter? Why put yourself in the line of fire?" Ryan sat down in the chair behind the desk, looking thoughtful for a moment. "Because, Mark, I wanted to see the truth. I wanted to experience it firsthand, how my staff is treated, how my customers treat us. Most importantly, I wanted to know if the people I worked with really cared about this place. I didn't want to be just a boss. I wanted to be part of the team." Mark remained silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the room, absorbing the weight of Ryan's words. "You built all this." "From the ground up," Mark finally said, his voice filled with awe. "And you didn't just sit in some office. You worked here side by side with all of us." Ryan nodded slowly. "Exactly. I wanted to understand. And what I've learned? Well, it's not always pleasant." He paused, looking Mark in the eye. "But that's why I'm doing this. I want to remind everyone that respect isn't about money. It's about how we treat each other. That's what the Velvet Spoon stands for." Mark stood in awe for a moment, nodding slowly. "You've got a lot of courage, Ryan. I'm proud to work here. I've always admired your dedication, but I had no idea it ran this deep." Ryan smiled, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Mark. Now I need you to do what you always do. Keep the service running smoothly. Let's not make a scene. We'll handle this like professionals." Mark took a deep breath, straightening his posture. "Got it. I won't let you down." Back to the dining area. The dining area was in an uneasy silence as the staff went about their duties, clearly affected by the tension in the air. Olivia sat at her table, still huffing in indignation, staring at the door through which Ryan and Mark had just disappeared. She was convinced she'd won. After all, she was the customer, and everyone knew the customer was always right, especially in a high-end place like the Velvet Spoon. She sipped her wine smugly, flipping her hair over her shoulder, glancing at her friends who had fallen silent in the face of her apparent victory. She was used to getting what she wanted, and in her world that usually meant bending everyone else to her will. But this time, there was something in the air she couldn't quite place. Something was different. She sighed dramatically, her eyes narrowing as she saw Mark approach from the corner of her eye. She was ready to demand an apology, or better yet, another round of complimentary drinks. She'd already made up her mind to ask for a discount. The nerve of Ryan. But what Mark said next caught her off guard. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice polite but firm, "the owner would like a word with you." Olivia blinked, her glass pausing halfway to her lips. She stared at Mark, trying to process what he had just said. "The owner?" Her voice cracked slightly as disbelief crept into her tone. "What do you mean, the owner?" Mark's face was impassive, but his eyes held a trace of respect. "The owner of the Velvet Spoon, please follow me." Before Olivia could protest, Mark stepped aside, motioning for her to follow him toward the back of the restaurant. She looked at her friends, confused and a little rattled, but they didn't seem to know any more than she did. She rose slowly from her seat, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, as she followed Mark with a sense of growing unease. Back office. The moment of truth. When Olivia entered the back office, she immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. The room was more subdued, the air thicker with tension. Ryan was standing at the desk, his posture calm and collected as always. But now something was different. He wasn't just a waiter. He wasn't just some underpaid worker. He was the one in control. Olivia's eyes widened in shock as she realized she had walked right into the heart of the storm. "Ms. Carter," Ryan began, his voice steady, his tone professional but carrying a weight she wasn't prepared for. "I think you owe me an apology," Olivia scoffed, her anger bubbling up once more. "I don't owe you anything. Do you know who I am?" Ryan met her gaze without flinching. "Yes, I do. You're the kind of person who thinks that money and status give you the right to treat others however you want. But let me make one thing clear. I built this place. I own it." The words hit Olivia like a slap in the face. She staggered back slightly, her eyes wide in disbelief. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Ryan continued, his voice now tinged with quiet authority. "I didn't want to fire you, Olivia. I didn't want to make a scene. But I do want to remind you that respect isn't about how much you have in your bank account. It's about how you treat people. How you treat those who can't give you anything in return." Olivia stood frozen for a moment, struggling to regain her composure. The arrogance she had carried so easily now felt like a weight she couldn't bear. "I'm not the one you need to apologize to," Ryan said, stepping closer. "The people you need to make amends with are the ones who truly matter. The ones who work every day to make this restaurant a success. The ones who keep everything running while you sit in judgment." Olivia opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She felt small. She felt vulnerable. The power she had once felt in her wealth now seemed meaningless in the face of Ryan's calm confidence. "You can leave, Olivia," Ryan said softly, his gaze unyielding. "I won't ask you to return. You've made it clear that you don't belong here." With a final glance at Ryan, Olivia turned, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, her heels clicking sharply as she left the velvet spoon behind her. The evening was at its peak. The restaurant hummed with the soft murmur of conversations, clinking silverware, and the occasional laughter of satisfied guests. The atmosphere at the Velvet Spoon was typically one of quiet elegance, the kind of place where every guest felt like royalty. But tonight, an uncomfortable tension hung in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Olivia Carter had just stormed out of the back office, her face flushed with embarrassment, her pride bruised. She'd never been treated like this before. She was used to getting what she wanted, used to people bowing down to her every whim. But Ryan had not only refused to cower before her, he had just delivered a crushing blow to her ego, and she couldn't process it. As she strode to the front of the restaurant, she quickly checked her phone, hoping to find some way to salvage her evening. But the damage had been done. Her mind raced with fury, and the pit in her stomach only grew deeper. She was humiliated, and that was a feeling she wasn't used to. Ryan had always been polite, unassuming, and calm. Yet tonight he had revealed the truth. The owner. She tried to shake it off, but it lingered in her mind. He had been the owner all along. She was nobody in his world, and that realization made her blood boil. Back in the dining area, the staff was still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. Whispers had already begun to spread among the employees, who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Ryan had always kept to himself, worked humbly, and stayed out of the spotlight. But in that moment, everything had changed. As Olivia marched back to her table, her face still red from the exchange, she could feel the eyes of every diner on her. The whispers weren't just coming from the staff now. Even the customers were talking. The shock, the disbelief was palpable in the air. Ryan's calm presence lingered, even after he had left the office. And as he emerged from the back with Mark, his composure only added to the tension. Ryan took a slow breath and moved back toward the dining area, his gaze scanning the room for Olivia. She sat at her table now, still trying to regain some semblance of control, but it was clear to everyone that her mask had cracked. Ryan stood silently for a moment, taking in the atmosphere of the room. It had changed. The energy in the restaurant felt charged, the sense of respect for him growing stronger. The moment had arrived, the time for the truth to be revealed. He walked up to Olivia's table, his footsteps measured, steady. As he reached the table, the chatter in the room quieted. Olivia looked up at him, still clinging to the remnants of her dignity, but her eyes flickered with unease. She had no idea what was coming next. Ryan paused in front of her, his gaze calm and unwavering. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. Olivia scoffed. "What is this now, huh? Are you here to lecture me about respect?" She sneered, trying to maintain control. "You're just a waiter. You don't get to lecture anyone." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, trying to project the same arrogance she had before. Ryan stood motionless for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. And then he spoke, his voice clear and strong, cutting through her defensiveness like a blade. "I am the owner." The words were simple, but they hit like a thunderclap. The room went silent. Every head in the restaurant turned. Every eye in the room was on them. Olivia froze. Her eyes widened in shock and her smug expression faltered. "What did you say?" She stammered, her voice trembling for the first time. "I am the owner of the Velvet Spoon," Ryan repeated, his tone unwavering. He looked her dead in the eye. "I own this restaurant." He paused, allowing the truth to sink in. "In this restaurant, we treat everyone with respect, regardless of what's in their wallet." His words carried an undeniable authority that silenced the entire room. The impact was instantaneous. The shock on Olivia's face was visible to everyone. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She blinked rapidly, unable to process the information. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her wine glass, as if trying to steady herself. Ryan continued, his voice still calm but firm. "You didn't know who I was, but now you do. And now you know that no one is above respect, not in my restaurant." He held her gaze for a moment longer before turning to address the entire room. "Everyone here deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their station in life." For a long moment there was complete silence. The staff, who had been watching the scene unfold in the back, stood frozen, eyes wide in shock. The diners in the restaurant exchanged confused glances, unsure of how to react. Ryan's words lingered in the air, powerful and undeniable. The restaurant, once bustling with the usual din of conversation and clinking glasses, was now still. Even the music seemed quieter, as if the room was collectively holding its breath. Olivia's face flushed a deep shade of red. She stammered an apology, her words stumbling out in a rushed, embarrassed manner. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Ryan raised a hand, cutting her off. "It's not about what you think you know, Olivia," he said quietly. "It's about how you treat others. If you want respect, you have to give it first." His gaze softened for a brief moment. "I suggest you think about that." For the first time since she entered the restaurant, Olivia was speechless. The smugness she had carried with her throughout the evening had evaporated, replaced by a deep sense of humiliation. She was no longer the powerful customer. She was just another person who had been shown the consequences of her actions. Ryan turned away from her and addressed the rest of the room. "Let's get back to business," he said, his voice steady. "Please enjoy your meals." He nodded toward Mark, signaling him to resume service. The manager, still stunned, quickly moved into action as if on autopilot. Olivia sat there, stunned, her eyes wide with embarrassment. The rest of the diners resumed their meals, but the energy in the room had changed. People exchanged glances, some of them silently applauding Ryan's handling of the situation. The power dynamics had shifted. Olivia was no longer in control. Ryan was. As Ryan walked away, the whispers began again, but this time, they were different. They were filled with admiration for the man who had not only built a successful business, but had done so with humility, kindness, and respect. Olivia sat silently at her table, her face pale as she realized the full weight of her actions. She had thought money and status gave her the right to treat people however she wanted. But tonight, she learned the hard way that respect couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. The silence that followed Ryan's words was deafening. Olivia sat frozen in her chair, the color drained from her face. Her eyes darted from Ryan to the now quiet room, where the weight of the revelation seemed to hang in the air, like a fog that refused to dissipate. No one spoke. The hum of the restaurant had ceased. Even the music, usually a soft undercurrent to the dining experience, seemed to have lost its presence. Ryan stood before Olivia for a moment longer, his calm demeanor unwavering. It was a rare sight, a man with so much power, so much influence, standing still with no need to assert dominance. His gaze softened slightly as he looked at Olivia, but there was no anger in his eyes. "No need for it. I hope today teaches you something, Olivia," Ryan said quietly, his voice steady but filled with quiet authority. Olivia sat there, her face flushed with embarrassment and shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her throat tightened, and she realized for the first time in a long while that she was the one who had been wrong. It wasn't just about the wine or the bag, or the fact that Ryan had been just a waiter. It was about how she had treated him, and, by extension, everyone around her, without a word. She reached into her purse and pulled out her credit card, her movements stiff and mechanical. Ryan didn't ask for an apology, nor did he make any gestures of offering a discount or favor. He simply stood silently, watching her, waiting for her to make her own decision. She handed the card to Mark, who had been standing in the background, unsure of how to proceed. Mark took it quietly, swiping it without a word. The tension in the air remained thick, and it seemed that the entire restaurant had paused, each person waiting for what would come next. As Mark returned the card and receipt, Olivia stood slowly, her movements jerky. She glanced briefly at Ryan, but there was no defiance in her eyes now, only the sting of shame. She took the receipt, folded it quickly, and turned toward the exit without another word. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor as she passed by the tables, but the sound felt different now, heavy, almost apologetic, as if she was trying to avoid the eyes of the people she had just insulted. The door swung shut behind her with a soft chime, and the room fell back into an awkward silence, the hum of the restaurant slowly returning, but with a different energy now. The staff, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of respect and admiration for Ryan. They had all seen how Olivia treated him, how she treated people like them, and now they had seen how Ryan handled the situation with quiet dignity. The staff's silent admiration as the staff continued with their tasks. The tension in the air began to shift, replaced with a sense of admiration for Ryan's calm leadership. The kitchen had gone silent, the cooks pausing to exchange looks. In the dining area, several of the waiters whispered among themselves, their eyes on Ryan as he returned to his post. Lily, the head waitress, walked up to Ryan, a small smile playing on her lips. "You handled that better than I ever could have," she said softly. There was no mockery in her voice, only genuine respect. "I've never seen someone stay so calm in a situation like that." Ryan smiled at her, a quiet smile that reflected years of experience and self-discipline. "Sometimes there's no need to make a scene. Just let the truth speak for itself," he gestured to the bustling restaurant. "We do this because we care. Every person in here deserves respect no matter who they are." "That's what matters," Lily nodded, her eyes warm. She had seen Ryan deal with difficult customers before, but she had never seen him so composed. Olivia had crossed a line that no one could have anticipated, and yet Ryan had handled it with a calmness that defied the circumstances. As Ryan returned to his station, a young waiter, Ethan, who had been working at the Velvet Spoon for just a few months, approached him shyly. "Ryan," he said, his voice low but earnest, "I just wanted to say, you handled that like a real leader." Ryan turned to look at Ethan, a soft glimmer of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," he replied simply. "But leadership isn't about making a scene. It's about showing up every day, doing your best, and treating others with respect." Ethan smiled, taking in Ryan's words. "I've been working in restaurants for years, but I've never seen anyone like you. The way you treat everyone here, it's different." His voice carried a mixture of awe and admiration. "I want to be like that. I want to be a leader like you." Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder, the weight of his experience grounding him as he looked at the young waiter. "Ethan, a title doesn't define respect, actions do. Remember that. Respect is earned through what you do every day, how you treat others, and how you show up when it matters." A lesson learned as the night continued. The energy in the velvet spoon had transformed. The usual clatter of dishes, the murmur of happy diners, and the rhythmic hum of the staff working together now had a new layer of respect. The staff moved with a renewed sense of pride, their heads held higher as they served the guests. It wasn't just about the food or the ambiance. It was about the atmosphere Ryan had created. An atmosphere of mutual respect that ran through the restaurant like a current. Later that evening, as the final orders were served and the last guests had left, Ryan stood at the front of the restaurant, looking out over the now empty tables. The lights above had dimmed slightly, casting soft shadows over the polished wood floors. The restaurant was quiet, and for a moment it felt like a sanctuary, a place where integrity and humility had triumphed over arrogance and entitlement. Mark approached Ryan, a warm smile on his face. "You know," he said, "I've worked in this business for years. I've seen it all, but I've never seen someone handle a situation like that. You've shown all of us what it means to be a leader." Ryan nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Leadership isn't about titles, Mark. It's about showing up for the people who count on you, and doing the right thing when no one's looking. It's about leading by example." Mark extended his hand, shaking Ryan's firmly. "I've learned more tonight than I have in years, Ryan." "Thank you." Ryan looked around the restaurant, feeling the weight of his decision settle into his bones. "No, Mark," he said quietly. "Thank you. You've all been here for me. This place wouldn't be what it is without all of you." As Mark left to finish the final tasks, Ryan remained for a few moments, lost in thought. The lesson had been learned, not just by Olivia, but by everyone who had witnessed the exchange. Respect wasn't something you could demand. It was something you earned, through actions, through how you treated others, through how you showed up every day. And that was the kind of leadership Ryan had always wanted to demonstrate. Weeks passed, and the Velvet Spoon continued to thrive, earning rave reviews for its exceptional food, and even more for its incredible work culture. Word had spread about Ryan's leadership, and the restaurant was becoming known not only for its delicious cuisine, but also for the respect and kindness shown to every customer and employee. Ryan's decision to lead from the heart had changed everything. The atmosphere was different now. The staff moved with pride. The guests felt the warmth of genuine hospitality, and even the restaurant's most difficult customers began to notice the subtle shift in the way they were treated. One evening, as the dinner rush began, a nervous new waiter accidentally spilled a bowl of hot soup onto a customer's lap. The room went still, but Ryan, ever the calm and collected leader, walked over to the table with a gentle smile. "It's okay," he said to the young waiter. "We'll take care of it." He helped clean the mess up without a word of anger, showing the young man how to handle mistakes with grace. As Ryan stood back and surveyed the room, full of laughter, conversation, and warmth, he spoke softly to himself. "Money can buy food," he murmured, "but never class." Ryan had come full circle. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories every day.